Hello, people of the world, wherever you may find yourself in time and space. My name is Morten. I am starting now because it's 10 a.m. in Vancouver, Canada. Welcome to this live stream that you will probably mute myself here. So I will be doing a demo of various things that I've been experimenting with using ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot to do coding. I have a comments panel here. So if you are watching this on LinkedIn or YouTube, you can actually leave comments and I can see them and I can bring them in. However, I will be watching, like, the comments panel is on a separate screen from where I'm working. So if I don't immediately respond to your comment, that's probably why. You can also talk amongst yourself in the comments. I will try to bring in some comments as they come in, but like I said, I need to pay attention to two different things at the same time. So there's that. Let's see, I'm just gonna get out of this window so I don't distract myself. And over here, I need to set up a couple of things so that you can see what I'm talking about. So I will say, let's see, percent and screen, share screen. And I want to share, I'm gonna share the entire screen here. So I'll share the screen. Ta-da, ChatGPT. Well, we're not gonna start there. We're gonna start over here. So I have, this is, what is it? Visual Studio Insider. And I have the most recent version of ChatGPT, of Copilot installed, which is different from the Copilot that you see if you're just using Copilot on its own. It sits over here, and it manifests more like a chat interface than the previous Copilot does. So it says, hello, Morten, I'm your Copilot, blah, 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 blah. I can do cool things like generate user unit tests for the code, or explain a selected piece of code, or propose a fix for a bug in code, etc. And it's really a chat interface. Now, what I want to demonstrate here, I'm actually going to zoom in a bit more so it's easier to see. Yes. Maybe if I do this, let's see, I'm just but then you can't see what I'm typing. That's not great. Maybe if I just share this without my face, that's probably good, right? So one of the things I want to show you is how, even though Copilot and ChatGPT uses the same system, they disagree on things a lot. And it's actually meaningful to use them in combination. So I'll show you some examples of this. I'll also show you just how I work with it. I'm gonna give you a couple of examples. One is we're gonna try to build an app from scratch that is beyond just a basic stupid app that does nothing. And I'm also gonna show you how to like do weird debugging of code. But I want to start here with this interface because this is a good example of something. So let's say you're going to build an app that, what is it this app is going to do? All right, we're going to build a shopping cart, a very, very trivial shopping cart. But all it does is keep track of what's in the cart and then calculate the taxes for what's in the cart. But I don't really want to write the code for this. I want to see if I can coax AI to help me build this, but I want to use a reactive pattern within JavaScript just to make it difficult. So like you could build a shopping cart app in many different ways. I'm going to try to use a reactive coding pattern because that's a good way of building things in JavaScript. And let's say I have no idea what this is. I've just been told that I need to use a reactive coding pattern, or even worse, in the project, I've just been told you need to use this code here with no explanation. So I'll start off by just going to Copilot and saying, what is this? And see what it says. So Copilot now goes into the file, looks at the highlighted code, and then thinks before it says anything. And then we'll see what it responds with. If it works, sometimes it does nothing. It just sits there and thinks forever. So that might be a thing. Okay, here we go. The code provided is a JavaScript class definition of a reactive object. It has methods for subscribing and unsubscribing to updates, as well as updating all subscribers. Cool. That's a very short explanation. Let's see what ChatGPT says. So I'll take this code and I'll go over to ChatGPT and I'll try with GPT 3.5 first and say, what is this? And just paste in the code and then see what it says. So the code provided is a JavaScript class called reactive object. It presents an object, blah, blah, blah. Here's a breakdown of the class and method. So it provides me with way more information than Copilot did. Hold on, let me just hide this. So it actually goes through the code and tells me what is going on in the code. So the constructor method initializes the subscriber array, which will hold the callbacks that are subscribed to the object. The subscribe method takes the callback function and adds it to. So this actually explains what the code does, which is useful if I have no idea what this is. Let me see if I can get Copilot to explain it. Explain how this code works. Let's see what it does. Because one thing I've noticed with Copilot is it's far terser than ChatGPT. So it'll provide shorter explanations of things, and you have to ask for more to get it to do things. So this code defines a JavaScript class called reactive object that has and then so now it is giving me the instructions. Now let's see if we give the same instruction to GPT-4. So I'll do this, and then I'll make a new chat over here. So I'll call this chat. No, I'm not even going to bother. I'll just make a new chat. GPT-4, no plugins or anything, just paste in the same thing. So what is this? See what it says. Let's see. So it's a basic JavaScript implementation of the observer pattern, also known as pub/sub, publisher subscriber model. So it goes through a similar explanation of what is going on. So it says here, like the reason why it's called React is because the concept here is reactivity, where certain parts of a program react to changes in state elsewhere. It's a common pattern for building decoupled systems. And then this pattern is frequently used in various programming scenarios, such as event handling and data binding in frameworks like Vue and React. In fact, if you work like reactive patterns, not to be confused with React, this is not React. The most prevalent case of reactive patterns I've seen is in use in Vue, and there are also various libraries and extensions you can use to build advanced reactive patterns. But because I'm a glutton for punishment, I'm going to do this all in just JavaScript. So I have this. I need to get to a shopping cart from this. So I need to do something here. Now I could go over to Copilot and ask. Actually, let's use Copilot from the top here and just start a comment and say shopping cart app that monitors. Let's see if I just close away this for a second. So you can see how it's trying to guess what I'm doing. So the AI is constantly trying to guess what I'm doing here. So that monitors the state of the cart and updates the UI. No, it monitors the items in the cart and updates the total price. Sure. Including taxes. The taxes are... let's see. Let's make it difficult for the AIs. I'll say the app is in British Columbia, Canada, and has to calculate taxes based on the province's tax rate. Total price of the cart, yeah, sure. Has to be able to add and remove items from the cart, yes. Has to be able to update the quantity of items in the cart, sure. Updated price of no, let's not do that. The province tax rate is 12%. So that's technically correct, but in BC, there's actually two separate taxes. Split between, that's not correct. Two different taxes. There we go. 5% GST and 7% PST. Okay, so the AI was actually able to surface the correct information. I just had to really, really, really coax it. So now we have the reactive object. I need to build more things here, but I don't really know where to start. So let's see. I'll save this and I'll say, we first need a function to, let's just create a new function. Oh, okay, cool. So it just says class cart extends reactive object. Yeah, that's fine. That sounds like what I need. What happens inside cart? Oh, okay. So here we have the constructor that pulls in super. So that's the overall cart, and then it sets up an items array and sets up a tax rate. And then it adds item, removes items, updates item quantity, gets the total, and gets the total with tax. So this looks decent, but it's not exactly what I want. One thing I can do with Copilot is I can go in and look at what it's actually doing. So let's see, I can say, how do I do this again? So if I go and say, because this interface is a little bit new from view. Can I open this Copilot as its own window here? Maybe I can't. Okay, so let's just look at the suggestion again so I can see if there's other suggestions here. So there's some different variants of the same thing. This one uses an index. Let's see, what is the big difference here? So this one sets more properties in the main object. I think that makes sense, right? That you have all the properties in the constructor object. So if I'm not happy with exactly what it's giving me here, what I can do is, if I can get this right, so you hold down, nope, that's wrong. There. So you can hold down Command or Control and then use the arrow key to, instead of hitting Tab to accept everything, you can arrow key through the suggestion. And what you're doing here is you are slowly coaxing or nudging or seeding the AI to update its code suggestion. So if I tab through here, I say, like, the constructor is correct. I want super. The item one is correct, but instead of saying this tax rate, I want to say this GST, because that's the general service tax in BC. And then I'll arrow through that and then see what it says now. So this PST, yes, correct. And then will it continue? Can you give me the rest now? Add item, sure. So push item to the constructor. Yeah, that's correct. Let's see, what else do you want? Remove item, that just, I guess, goes in and removes it. Right, so because we're working with an array here, we need to go filter. So what if instead of array, actually, I'm going to go back up again and then say, I'll take out this items, or I'll change this items to set. Let's see, because if I make if I make a set, then there will only be one unique items. That does actually make sense here. So if I change it to a set instead of an array, it's easier to find the items, because in a set, you can only have one instance of each item. So you don't have to like know the index number of an item and then iterate through. You can just say the item you're looking for. But that also means that each of my items need to have a name, but we'll sort that. So add item, this item, add item. Yes, that's correct. And then remove item. Let's see, item, delete item. See, this is why you use a set, right? So instead of having to do a filter and go through the array to try to figure out what's going on, you can just pass the item itself and it'll be found in the set because there's only one of them. So that's fine. Let's see what it says. Update item quantity. So that grabs the item and the current quantity and updates it. Yes, that sounds good. And what else? Calculate total. So here we'd have to grab the total and then add the item price. This doesn't sound right to me, but let's just pretend that it is. I guess it assumes here that the item price is the item price plus tax, I'm guessing. So calculate taxes. So then we do the calculate total. Oh, I see. So it calculates taxes after the fact, sure. And then what? Calculate grand total. So it makes a bunch of methods. And then we end, whoops. And then we end the whole thing. Cool. So this actually does make sense. And I still haven't really written any code, of course. So now we have a reactive object class that works. By the way, if let's see. So you should be able to hear me again now because I now have a different headset on. The other headset died because of power. I need to have more power for it. So anyway, if you have a reactive, so hopefully you will get audio back soon. Yes, can someone confirm that you have audio back? That would be great. No audio, it seems. Hello, hello, hello. No audio, but it says I have audio. It's back, good, okay. Thank you very much, Francisco. So if you're working with a reactive pattern, just for reference, this code here never changes. This is a standard reactive pattern setup. The way a reactive pattern works is you create an object from the reactive class. So this cart down here is the object, and that becomes the observable object. And then when a user subscribes to the object, what gets added into the subscriber array here is a callback method. So anytime there's a change in the cart updates the subscriber. You see here, it calls update subscriber on itself. That's the function up here, update subscriber. And update subscriber throws the callback function back to the subscriber. So the subscriber then gets information. So that means in addition to having the cart here, we need to first initialize the cart and we need to create a subscriber. So if let's see, class item extends, I really feel like I need to, okay, we're just going to continue here. So extends reactive objects, constructor name. So we have name, price, quantity. What is quantity doing for an individual object? I don't know. Let's just see what it does. Sure. Cart view. What is a cart view class? So it takes the cart and then it says subscribe to what? Oh, I see. So this is the thing that would output. Actually, you know what? I don't like this. But let's just leave it the way it is. Who knows what's going to happen here? So this one console logs out all of the information. So it gives you that renders out the total, the taxes, the grand total. Okay, so I needed to render out the individual taxes though. So instead of this, I wanted to say console log, and I don't, yeah, sure. So we can say GST. So this cart GST. So watch this. Because I did that, if I hit return now, the AI will be like, I see what you're doing. So here's the PST. Whoops. So here's the PST too, right? So it detects patterns. So, and this is something that you can really exploit as you're working with it, because you can, for instance, give it a pattern and then have it repeat the pattern for you. So I'm just going to take this out. Okay, so now we have all these pieces, right? Item view. Do you really need an item view? I guess we do. I'm just going to let it go and see what it does. So here's we have a constructor that gives us all the information about the item. And then, okay, so here we create the new cart, right? So we create a new cart, we create a cart view, we create an item view, add the item to the item view, remove the item, update item quantity, remove the item again. This is just making tests now. The one thing that's missing, I think it'll just go into loop now. Okay, so this isn't useful. But what's missing here is we need to subscribe somehow to the card. So let's see, why is it not doing that? You know what, let's just run this and see what it does. I don't think this will do anything right now. This doesn't look complete to me, but let's just run it. So we'll say node, I need to go into the right folder. So node scripts.js, see what it does. Errors. Okay, cool. So this actually gets us somewhere because it says set requires new. All right, so there's something not right here. Let's go back up and say, where is the set defined? So it's up here. So I'll just take this and I'll say in the chat, what's wrong with this code? Now, keep in mind, this code was generated by the AI, but because the AI doesn't know what it is, like it doesn't know itself, it doesn't know. Okay, so it didn't understand. Let's see, what if I say, on line 31, I get, so I'll just say this, I get this error message. I get this error message. The error message is likely because you're to fix the error, change the line to this item, new set. Okay, so I made a mistake here. Where are we? So this item, new set. Okay, cool. Let's try this again. Oh, look at that. It works. Check it out. So it adds an item, and then it calculates the total, then the GST and PST and grand total for those two values. So then I can say, let's see, I need to figure out that output here because the output is not quite right. So console log grand total. So what if we say round to 2 decimal spaces for all these values? So let's try that. I'll say, take this away. Console log total, discard calculate total. No. No. Sometimes it'll do it for me, so the values. But these values are returned from elsewhere. So what if I do that down here? And then say console log. There we go, 2 fixed 2. So you see how I have the value, but I want to round it to 2 spaces. So I have to coax the machine to do the solution I want by giving it a comment to say, like, do this instead. And then now that I have this, I can just either copy it and paste it down, or I can just go console log, see how it's adding 2 fixed 2. And then I say GST, and then it should do the same. Whoa, no, that's wrong. It's not always that smart. Charge GST to fix, yes, thank you. And then PST, thank you. And then grand total, yes, okay, cool. Oops. So this kind of, the purpose of this demo is to show you how you can work with the tool, but you really have to Oh, interesting. It's giving me the percentage value. That's not what I want. I didn't notice that. Did it do that before too? Oh, it did. That's not what I want at all. Okay. So let's see. Calculate GST and PST. No, that's the value. Just discard GST to fix 2. That's still the value. So where's that? So we need to do the math for this. So we have this GST here. So then we need to do some math. So we can say, okay, let's make this something else. So instead of these, I'll say, there we go. So you saw how I just took the pattern out, and now it's giving me the actual calculations. So saying, grab the total and then the GST and then 2 fix 2. So that's correct. And then it should give me the PST as well. Yes, save that. Go down and run it again. So now it gives me these values. All right, so now I can test it and see if I add a bunch of items. So I'll add, let's create an array of items instead. So is cart view never used? An item view is never used. Okay, let's ignore those for now. So I'll make here, I'll make a new array called items equals, and then an array. New item, an apple, orange, banana. No more items? Just apple, orange, banana? Really? New item, pear. There we go. No? Peach. Oh, there's a lot of fruit today. Okay, well, I guess this is a fruit store. And then we need to iterate through each of them to add a new item. So I will say in place of this, I'll say items for each item. Yes. What do you want to do? Cart, add items. Sounds right. Okay, so now we're iterating through a list of items. And what should happen is, because we have this observer pattern, it should then fire off every time we add a new item. We get a new breakdown of the cart view. Item is not defined. Where? Items for each item. Item view. Okay, so let's just mix these two for now. I think they're the ones that are causing the problem. And then these two. Now it does nothing. Do I need this? Oh, do I need to move this in here maybe? Oh, right. I need to add the item view to it. So I'll say cart new item. And then let's see, does that do it? No. So I need both of these instances, I guess. There we go. So now we see, now you can see every time we add a new item to the cart, it re-renders. I'm just going to make it a little clearer what's happening here. So we'll say new item added. Actually, and then before that, I'll put in like this so that we get a line break. Well, that was the item view. So we'll do cart view up here. Wait, isn't that where it gets output? Why is it not? So cart view render, it says. There we go. Hold on. So now there should be a space before. So yeah, New York card update total GSDP is the grand total. That also means that the item view isn't actually doing anything. So can I just nix the item view? You can. Okay, so what you're seeing here is it's doing what I wanted to do. But for me to be able to use this in any meaningful way, I need to know what I need, right? This is actually really important to understand that these AI tools, they will actually let you build very advanced code, but it's not possible to build advanced code and do things unless you know, number one, what you're building, and number two, how to get it, what that should look like and what kind of output it is. And number three, how to do it the correct way. Because as you saw, as I was building it it wasn't doing it correctly, and I keep having to correct it. I also have to kind of lead it down paths. When it says things, I'm like, no, I don't want an array. I want a set. I need to know what sets that sets exist. I need to know how to set them up. I need to be able to use them, and I need to understand the pattern because it doesn't always do things right. For instance, here we have this thing that says card view is assigned, but the value is never used. So the way that it's implementing card view here is not fantastic. So instead of, I'll save this because this currently works, right? So I'll save this and I'll just say to Copilot, can you optimize this code? Let's see what it says. Let's see. So it should, the code for it seems to already be optimized. However, there's a warning message indicating that the card view variable is assigned but never used. If you're not using card view, but watch this. So card view is never assigned, right? So I'll take it out and then run the script again. And now I get nothing because card view is actually doing something. Card view is the callback method, right? So this is a malformed piece of code that it gave me because there's a piece here that in the code looks like it shouldn't be there, but is actually doing something, which is far from great. There's also this item view that does nothing, that has no purpose. It exists, but it does nothing. So I need to figure out how to fix this. So what I'll do is give the entire pile of code to GPT-4. I'll start a new chat here, go to GPT-4 and say, improve. No, I'll say refactor this code and fix any errors. And I'll just paste the whole thing in and just see what GPT-4 does with it. Because you saw how Copilot said this is fine, but there's this weird thing that doesn't make any sense. But GPT-4 will go in, even though Copilot runs GPT-4, like I said, they disagree on things. So it says, currently the add item method in the card class accepts an item and adds it to the item set. However, set does not support duplicate values. So I shouldn't have used set, apparently. The update item quantity method in the card class is trying to use the update method on the set object, which doesn't exist. This happens a lot. Like it's doing something that you can't do. It might be better to handle the quantities inside the item class itself and update the cart automatically when an item's quantity changes. We should also be careful to ensure item quantities never drop below 1. So then it provides a bunch of code here to try to explain it. And it's important to notice here that it's not actually changing the whole code. It's changing part of my code. So I can't just hard copy this and paste it in. I need to figure out what I'm replacing. So we have the item class being replaced, the cart class being replaced, and that's it. Okay, so I'll copy this, copy code. Now we're working with 2 AIs at the same time, which is actually far more useful than just working with one. So let me look at my code briefly here to see. So we have the cart class here before the item class. So wait, does it? Yes, it does. Oh, look at this. So both the item class and the cart class here extend reactive object. So I'm just going to replace these. So I'll say, I'll grab cart and item, and I'll replace those two. Save that, open my terminal, and we get cart view is not defined. I'll go back and say, cart view is not defined. Fix it for me, please. Apologize for the oversight. So whenever you work with these AIs, you'll discover they're very polite. They're like, they'll give you horrendous errors and just be super, super wrong about things. And then when you point it out, they're like, apologies for my mistake. Of course, this was wrong. Here's the correct answer. And then sometimes the answer it'll provide is also incorrect. So I'll say every factor the cart and item classes without modifying the cart view and cart view items class below the updated cart view and cart item classes. What? So, oh, I see. They had to be updated as well. So I'll copy that code. So we have cart view and item view. So let's find those two. Here's item view, cart. Let's see. So this is the cart class. This is the item class, reactive object class at the top. Here's item view. So if I paste in new cart view and item view here, item view is still not being used. I'll save that, run it again. Now we get the output. And it's correct. So I'll say, I'll copy all of this back in, go to the bottom and say, item here is never used. See what it says. So more than likely what it'll do is add new methods at the bottom or some sort of new calls to item view at the bottom. Yes, that's what it does. So it goes into the items array and then it adds for each item, new item view, and then add item. So it says here, cart view, new cart view, and then for each item, right? So I'll just, I think this is the only change, very bottom. We're doing for each item, instead of add item, we're doing item view first. So then what happens? Nothing. Create a view for each item to monitor changes. Doesn't do anything. You're correct. The current item view class indeed doesn't add much to the functionality as the item updates are handled by the cart and cart view. If you want item view to reflect changes. So you see what's happening here? The rationale that was used by Copilot to build this example wasn't fully thought through because there is no thinking agent here. It's just making a pattern. And because I wasn't strongly controlling it, it created this whole set of functionality that has no purpose. And I have two choices now. I can either just eliminate it from my code, or I can try to incorporate it. But because it actually has no purpose, I should just eliminate it entirely. As you can see, it says like the rest of the code should work fine without it. So I'll just say, actually, let's go back to Copilot and see if it can do it for me. Eliminate the view feature. See what it does. If you want to eliminate item view, you can simply remove the new item view item from the for each loop. This will remove the creation of view for each item. So yeah, because that's this part here, but that doesn't actually take it out. But I guess that means I can just find item view here and just nuke it, and it won't make any difference. And it doesn't. Okay, so that kind of solves the problem. This part here, though, because of how this is wired, I'm not entirely sure how to rewire it because I haven't been paying attention to how this is put together. So I'm still getting the, what is the warning here? Card view is assigned a value but never used. Let's see if I can copy this. I'm still getting this warning. And then we can see if we'll try to fix it. So this isn't the solution. Okay, so we'll take this over here and say, I'm getting a warning. Let's see if GPT-4 can figure this out, or ChatGPT can figure this out. This warning is correct. See, this is neat because it does see that there's a problem, and then it'll try to solve it for me. So let's see, this assign and never used in your code, however, it's still doing its job due to the side effect of the constructor of card view. In your card view constructor, you're subscribing the instance, this render method to the changes to the cart. This means that every time you add, remove, or update items in the cart, the render method is automatically called, even though you're not explicitly calling it from the card view instance. That's why you're seeing the console output, even though you're never directly using card view. So card view is the callback method. If you want to remove the warning without changing the behavior of the code, you could assign a new card view instance to underscore to indicate that you don't intend to use it later in the code. Sure, but that's actually not great. So instead, I'll say refactor the whole code to remove this issue and see what it does, because this is malformed code. Like the way that it's set up isn't ideal for what we're doing, likely because of how I just tabbed through and it just continuously mocked around until it got somewhere. So let's see if it can work its way out to some code that actually does what it's supposed to do without that method. Like if I built this, I wouldn't break card view into its own class. I think that's the main problem here. This would just be a method that got called in. But let's see. So I'll just take this code. So it claims that this solves it. And just paste it in, save it, and rerun it and see. Okay, cool. Does it have the error still? There are no red lines. Okay, so that solved it. Cool. And here you see, if you were with me from the beginning, you will know I started with just the reactive object up here. This was the beginning of the code. And all I wanted was to build a shopping cart app. And of course, this shopping cart app is garbage. It can't be used the way it is. It has to have a lot more functionality. But Copilot was able to walk me through sort of how to solve the problem in a really clunky way. And then I could use ChatGPT Pro with GPT-4 to help me refactor the code until it doesn't have any errors, which gives me a good starting point. And this is advanced. I mean, it's written, what, 127 lines of code for me that I did not do. Did you fix the decimal points to 2 only? Yes, I did. It's here. See? Oh. See? Yes, right there. 2 fixed. And I did that because I asked, it did it because I asked it to. Okay, so this gives you a demo of how to use Copilot and how using ChatGPT with Copilot helps. Now, some people will probably ask, why don't you have ChatGPT running inside VS Code as well? You can. There are a bunch of extensions you can install that will allow you to have ChatGPT inside. I am paying for ChatGPT Pro. So because I'm already spending the money there, I don't also want to spend money on the API for this. Because if you install ChatGPT inside VS Code or your code editor, you hook it up to your API key, and then you're paying per token. So since I already pay for another service, I just use the service over there. Effectively, it is the same. The only thing you're missing is the ability to like highlight code and say, but as you saw, they can just copy and paste it in or copy and paste it back and forth. Hopefully, OpenAPI would eventually build an extension that brings ChatGPT Plus into VS Code. I don't think that's going to happen because they don't seem to be the developer type. They seem to be the data science kind of people. So they're relying on their community to build it, and ChatGPT is a product that they've built. I'm very curious to see. Oh, hey, Rachel. Yeah. So anyway, this was a fun demo, right? You like it? It's interesting. Let's see. I'm just going to answer a question here. So someone says, Tim Robbins says, is this presentation going to be available on demand? If you go back to this page when I'm done, you can rewatch the whole thing, and it'll live there. It also goes on YouTube. So it persists. You can come back and watch it later if you want to. See, are there any questions here? Very interesting. So I'm going to give you one more demo here, but if you have any questions or comments or something, please provide them now. And I'll try to respond because this is a conversation. Let's see, what does it say? Sorry, the screen that I'm looking at over here. Have you fixed the issue with decimals to only? Yes, I told the AI to do it to publish it yesterday, but it's still the same. Can you just go ahead and fix it manually? No, we can't. Like, yes. It's interesting how these things work. I mean, but if you look at the code, the way that this was resolved by ChatGPT or by Copilot, because I put it in the context of the output, the render output, it fixed the output down here. There's no good reason why we couldn't fix it where the actual math happens. So up here, so calculate total, remove item, like we could build the functionality elsewhere. And the reality is, like, I can build at any time here. I can go into the cart and say, in addition to add item, remove item, and calculate taxes, actually I can take the calculate taxes function here, and I can say a tax object with GST and PST. And then I'll just take away this and say, yes, calculate taxes, please. And then it'll create not what I asked for. So I'll say, actually, let's do that differently. Calculate, let's do this. So I'll say, calculate total of taxes for the cart. And then it receives, so it'll return a number. See, this is where you need to know what you want. And then I'll say props GST PST total. Right. See, okay, I'm gonna just say what I want. Calculate total taxes for the cart based on total price, sure. Input either GST, PST, or total. Output return. Type, so it will be GST, PST, PST. I'm just like, this isn't formalized language. I'm just trying to see if I can get the system to do what I want. So let's see what it does now. Calculate taxes. I really need to have type in here. And then the default's a total, sure. And then it says, the total is this calculate total. So GST total, so it creates the GST for me. It creates the PST for me. And then if the type is GST, then return GST. Else, if the type let's try to do, what is it called? A switch? Yeah, switch type. So case GST, return GST, case GST, return GST, and default. Cool. So now that I have this calculate taxes method up here, I need to use it down here. So let's see what I can do here. So if I nuke this, I'll comment this out, and I'll comment this out, and I'll comment this out, and let's see if I can get it to do it correctly now. So it has this card calculate taxes GST, huh? See? Yes, correct. That's exactly what I want. And now because I created the pattern, it should automatically do the same thing here. And finally, it should do the same thing here, grand total, and the new method. What's wrong here? Oh, I see. I forgot one. Parentheses. And if I run this, I should still get the same. Yes. So you're seeing how I still need to be here. My brain needs to be in this mix because I need to know how I'm handling my data. Is there a better way of handling the data? Should I approach this in a different way? Should I do something else? And then go in and try to logically reason myself through the code to add the features I want. And then when I change things, I then have to go back and change other things. Now, of course, what I could do is after I created that new method up here, the calculate taxes method, I could just take the code as a whole, dump it back into the system and say update, and then it would update based on the changes I made. But the notion that this replaces a developer is simply not true. As you can see, what's actually happening is it helps me write code faster, but it also leads me down dead paths all the time. Or as I like to call it, it goes on long trips in the forest, just nowhere, just wandering around in the forest. And you need to constantly go, no, I want to go over here. Specifically, I have a goal in mind. I need to go over here. And you will need to like constantly have an argument with it over what it's doing. Let's see. I'm gonna jump over to some comments here since there's a bunch of people in this chat. So let's see. Let's see. Here. I love this whole coding process with ChatGPT as a guide. Yes, it's actually really useful. I find it like it's been educational for me. I've learned a lot about my own coding by using this tool. It also allows you to, if you know what you want, it gives you the capability of very quickly iterating through ideas and doing things like if you're building anything from a template, like if you need a template, like say you're building a React app or a Vue app or something, you can just start by saying, I need a new component and just state the component name and it'll build the boilerplate component for you. The other cool thing, I think I'll do another one of these demos maybe next week where I'll go into another project because it's worth just watching and showing how this is done. But another thing you can do is if you have a project, the system is context, like Copilot is context aware to your project. So if you let's say you have a data object and you start typing in data, Copilot will go into the data object file if it sits somewhere else and figure out what properties exist and then try to surface them in your file. So you don't have to remember what's in the data object or copy it over. It'll actually help you because it's context aware. And if you define if you define a component using a specific coding pattern and you make a new component, then Copilot will go to your existing components and say, oh, there's a pattern. I'm going to use the same. So it'll enforce consistency in your code, even if you don't, which is super useful. Is Copilot paid for? Yes, it is. I actually don't know what it costs. I'm an open source contributor to a bunch of projects, and because of that, I get it for free. I'm not sure how that got triggered, but I don't pay for it, but I think it's like $10 US per month. I want to say that might be not true. Somewhere in that realm, I would guess. You can pay for it monthly or yearly. So yeah, let's see. Read it. It was a joke about. Oh yeah. As I often say in my videos and other places, I have severe dyslexia. So when people dump like giant comments, I don't really read them well. So sorry about that. Let's see. What do you do when ChatGPT gives outdated code or truncates and you have no idea behind the reasoning? Sometimes it has a good idea that you don't understand and the implementation is long. How do you handle this? Okay, so this is really important. And I think this is something that isn't being clearly communicated by anyone. Large language models are very much bound by the training data they possess. In fact, large language models are not knowledge bases. So the way that we're using, especially ChatGPT now, is actually not a very good way of using ChatGPT, because we're treating ChatGPT as a knowledge base that we can ask questions and then it surfaces accurate information. But that's not what a large language model does at all. A large language model takes a set of data that you provided and then it refactors that data. But if you don't provide it any data, it's left to try to guess at what you want based on its training model. And what it does is it creates like a statistical model of what is the most likely response that you would get from this limited output, which is why you notice in the beginning of my demo, I was getting very, very generic code that wasn't all that useful. And as you saw, Copilot like created things I didn't need. But once I started providing existing code to ChatGPT, it was able to much more efficiently help me build better code. So that's number one, that when you're working with ChatGPT or any other large language model, to get usable results from the model, you have to input data to begin with. The idea that we can ask it a question and get authoritative answer and response is a misunderstanding of how the system works. It looks like you can do that, but what you're getting is just a statistical like a statistical model of what a type of language response would look like based on this question. Give it context in the form of code, it'll give you better code. That said, because these systems were trained on data that was capped sometime in 2021, it is unaware of code standards that came after. More importantly, the data that existed in 2021 heavily skews towards older ways of doing code, which is why if you build a JavaScript example, for example, it will use older techniques to do things unless you explicitly ask it not to. So you need to know what the modern standards are and how to do things the proper way, because the system will always move towards old ways of doing things simply because its training data is the internet. And if you go on the internet and you do a search for, say, a JavaScript tutorial, the vast majority of JavaScript tutorials that exist on the internet will show you how to do things the old way, because the new ways haven't been documented in a ton of tutorials yet. So everything is conservative, in not a political sense, but in a literal sense. Everything in like large language models tend towards conservatism in terms of only providing old ways of doing things. And coaxing the system into writing modern code can be a real challenge. I will definitely do a future demo of that because it's a serious challenge. And I've figured out some ways of doing it that are sort of useful. But thanks for that question, Felix. Let's see, Morton. How do you implement GitHub Copilot in your workflow? Any tips on when to use it, when not to use it? So what you saw is that, right? I have Copilot on all the time. It is effectively like over-eager autocorrect. So it doesn't just correct, it like tries to do things. And the way I use it is exactly what exactly what you saw when I started typing things in the code, right? That I don't go in and say, I want this, and then barf out all the code for me. That is not useful unless you're just doing the starting point. Like if you're working on a React project, you can do that to start something. Or if you're doing a standard thing, like if you're in the React component, adding type testing, for example, it'll do it automatically for you. So some things are useful, other things are not. But what I use it for the most is things like code consistency, finishing a sentence. So like, if I don't remember how to do some coding pattern, I'll just type in like, this is the coding pattern I want, and it'll do it. Or if I don't remember, there's a JavaScript method to like form dates a certain way, I can just type a comment that says how I want the date formatted, and it'll provide you with the date object that is formatted the correct way, right? So it's very helpful, and it's sort of like auto lookup for things. But it's important to remember that it's a language model. And one of the very, very infuriating things it does is sometimes it'll make things up to the point where it'll be like, a JavaScript method exists that has specific name, but you want to do something slightly different. And based purely on logic, there should be a similar method to do what you want to do. And it'll make up a method that doesn't exist and make it sound like it's a real thing. And then it'll implement it in your code and it won't work. And you will be like, why is it not working? And then you go looking on the internet and find out this is not a real thing. It's something the GPT model made up, which is not great for anyone who isn't an advanced developer, because you won't know why it's not working. And there won't be any documentation available about this method you're using because it doesn't exist, right? So it's a very weird experience. Let's see. So I actually have a meeting with Joanna right now, but I'm gonna answer all the questions first. So I'm assuming she's still on the call here, so she'll know. Let's see. What is your opinion about code security? Some companies do not allow use of these tools. Okay. Copilot, to my understanding, and based on the fact that it's a GitHub product that they are shipping to enterprise, should be completely safe to use. There's no reason to assume that Copilot is leaking code anywhere. The concerns you've heard from companies and that has been heavily publicized in the news are centered around ChatGPT specifically. So not GPT, not the OpenAI API. So if you have like the ChatGPT extension in VS Code, you're not actually using ChatGPT. You're using the GPT API from OpenAI. That is a different thing. ChatGPT specifically, the website I showed you, is a research project from OpenAI that is trying to understand how people use this tool. And by virtue of being a research project, they are looking at what you're doing. They're not there to like steal your information. They're simply looking at, when you input a query, what does the transformer do with it? Does it give you a coherent response? Do you then have to do a bunch of talking back and forth? Or do you get the answer you want right away? And if you didn't get the answer you wanted right away, is that because you provided a bad question? Or is it because the system provided a bad answer? This is clearly stated in ChatGPT's purpose. And if, like, I work for a big company, I'm not allowed to put my work code into ChatGPT. The reason is I made that rule. I'm on the committee that made that rule. And it's because in doing so, you are potentially leaking intellectual property to a third party. Now, understand that like that is a legal thing. It doesn't mean that OpenAI is spying on you. It doesn't mean that anyone is stealing your code. It actually doesn't even mean that there's any risk there in terms of someone seeing your code and doing something with it. The risk is if at some point something happens where, like, let's say you're working for like a super secretive telecom company and you're building some fancy code and you paste some of it into ChatGPT, and then later, 2 years later, that code that you wrote surfaces on the internet in some other application. And your company goes and sues whoever publishes that application and says, you stole our intellectual property. They can come back and say, you used ChatGPT. So you broke your own IP rules. You leaked the information yourself. So therefore you have no case. And that company is not OpenAI and has no connection with the OpenAI. They're simply using the fact that someone in your company put the information out into a third party
and therefore you invalidated your IP rights to it. It's like very complex legal nonsense. That's why it's an issue. So it's less about, there is no fear that OpenAI is going to do something malicious. There's a concern about IP rights and the very complex legal framing around IP rights. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Joanna's confirming $10 a month in the US. So in Canada, it's more because Canadian dollar is very weak. More of that. Let's see, is there any other questions? If GitHub Copilot and ChatGPT gives conflicting answers, which one do I go for, and how do I know which one is more accurate? Great question. Very frustrating answer is, you have to know. I'm so sorry. You actually have to know, because not only will ChatGPT and Copilot give you conflicting answers, if you ask just ChatGPT the same question 5 times, it will give you 5 different answers. If you ask Copilot the same question 5 times, it will give you 5 different answers, because both these systems are language models. They construct sentences, or they construct sentence-like objects based on complex math and statistics. And every time you send a query, unless you set the temperature to 0, it will always slightly differ in its response. And code is just treated like any other language by these systems, the main difference being that code is far more structured and logical than human language. So therefore, the systems are very good at producing code, but even as you watched me, you could see it was constantly outputting different variants of the same thing. And if, in fact, if I did this exact same demo again, every time it would be a different output. So as you are using this tool, first of all, if you're using Copilot, you could see that, like, as it suggests, you can click through options. Do that. Actually click through the options to see, are the other options better? Secondly, if it's producing code, you still have to read all the code and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. You can't fully trust this system. I think I once equated it to having an overeager intern with deep historical knowledge and no understanding of what you're actually doing. So you still need to be in full understanding of what your code is doing and how it works. And the best way to do that is, as Joanna says, test it extensively. The time you're saving by having the system build code for you should be invested in making sure that it's up to date to current standards, which is often not the case, and testing it to destruction to make sure it's doing what you're doing. So it makes you work faster, but it adds more complexity in other ways. Okay, this was fun. I'm going to do this again. I will post it up. I'll try to announce it a bit earlier next time. You can go follow me on LinkedIn, and then you get notifications when this happens. If you have any questions, queries, requests for types of demos you want to see or anything like that, send me a message either by leaving a comment on this chat, especially if you're watching this after the fact, or send me a message on LinkedIn, either by commenting on one of my postings or by sending me an email, or find me elsewhere, like on TikTok, and ask. And I'll try to do demos like this on a fairly regular basis of just real world problems and how to solve them using these tools, because they're super awesome. Until then, thank you all for joining me on this fantastic ride into AI chaos, and I will see you in the future. Have a good weekend.